The telegram arrived on a Tuesday morning in September of 1883, and Felicity Lawrence knew, before opening it, that her life in Philadelphia was about to end. Her hands trembled as she read the words her father had written, each one a nail in the coffin of everything she had known. You are to depart for Dillon, Montana Territory immediately. Your aunt requires assistance with her boarding house. This is not a request. Your behavior has left me no choice. Her behavior. The words stung like a slap across the face, though they were not entirely undeserved. She had refused 3 marriage proposals from suitable men, spoken her mind at dinner parties about women's suffrage, and worst of all, had been caught reading medical texts in her father's library, instead of the romantic novels deemed appropriate for a 22-year-old woman of her station. Philadelphia society had begun to whisper, and her father, a prominent banker, could not tolerate the shame. 3 weeks later, Felicity stood on the platform in Dillon, Montana Territory, with 2 trunks full of silk dresses utterly unsuited to frontier life and a heart full of bitter resentment. The town was nothing like Philadelphia. Rough wooden buildings lined a dusty main street where horses were tied to hitching posts and men in worn clothes walked with purpose. The September air carried the smell of pine trees and wood smoke, so different from the coal smoke and sea air of home. You must be Felicity. A woman in her 50s approached, her face weathered but kind. I am your Aunt Marjorie. Welcome to Dillon. Felicity wanted to say that she did not feel welcome, that she had been sent here as punishment and had no desire to be in this God-forsaken place. But years of training in proper behavior kept her tongue still. Thank you, Aunt Marjorie. I appreciate you taking me in. The boarding house was a 2-story structure on the edge of town, painted white with green shutters that needed repair. Inside, it was clean but sparse, with worn furniture and simple decorations. Marjorie showed her to a small room on the 2nd floor with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a window overlooking the mountains in the distance. I know this is not what you are accustomed to, Marjorie said gently. Your father wrote to explain the situation. But Felicity, this place might surprise you. Sometimes what looks like punishment turns out to be something else entirely. Felicity doubted that very much. The first week passed in a blur of unfamiliar tasks. She learned to cook breakfast for the boarders, to scrub floors until her hands were raw, to carry water from the pump in the yard. The silk dresses stayed in her trunk as she borrowed plain cotton work dresses from Marjorie. Her carefully maintained hands became rough and red. She fell into bed each night exhausted, too tired even to cry. The boarders were mostly miners and ranch hands, rough men who nodded politely but kept to themselves. They ate quickly and left for their work, returning only in the evening. Felicity served their meals and changed their linens, feeling like a servant in a life that bore no resemblance to the one she had planned. It was on a Thursday morning, 2 weeks after her arrival, that everything changed. She was sweeping the front porch when a man rode up on a bay horse, dismounting with the easy grace of someone who had spent his life in the saddle. He was tall, perhaps 26 or 27, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes the color of whiskey in sunlight. His clothes were dusty from travel, but there was something about him that made Felicity pause mid-sweep. "Morning," he said, his voice low and warm. "I am looking for a room. Heard Marjorie Lawrence runs a decent place." "She does," Felicity replied, trying to keep her voice neutral. "I am her niece. I can show you what is available." He tied his horse to the post and followed her inside, his boots heavy on the wooden floor. Up close, she could see the way the sun had tanned his skin, the small scar above his left eyebrow, the strength in his hands. There was something steady about him that she found both intriguing and unsettling. "I am Ethan Langford," he said as she led him upstairs. "I work at the Bar 7 Ranch, about 10 miles south of here. The bunkhouse there is full up, and I prefer a quieter place to sleep when I am not working." "Felicity Lawrence," she replied, opening the door to a vacant room. "This one has a good bed and catches the morning light. $5 a week, including meals." He looked around the room, then back at her, and something in his gaze made her breath catch. "This will do fine. I will take it." Over the following days, Felicity found herself increasingly aware of Ethan's presence in the boarding house. He was different from the other men, quieter and more observant. He said please and thank you, helped carry heavy buckets of water without being asked, and sometimes sat on the porch in the evening reading books that surprised her with their literary quality. "Dickens?" she asked one evening, unable to contain her curiosity when she saw the volume in his hands. He looked up, a hint of amusement in his eyes. "You sound surprised." "I am," she admitted. "Most of the men here do not seem like readers." "Most people are more than they seem," he said. "That is something you learn out here. You cannot judge by appearances." She wanted to ask him more, to know his story, but footsteps on the porch interrupted them. Another boarder needed something, and the moment passed. But it was the beginning of something, though Felicity did not recognize it yet. The Montana autumn deepened, bringing crisp mornings and the first hints of the harsh winter to come. Felicity's hands grew calloused, her skin took on a hint of sun despite her best efforts with bonnets, and slowly, almost without her noticing, the sharp edges of her resentment began to dull. Dillon was not Philadelphia, but it had its own rhythms and beauty. The mountains that surrounded the valley were spectacular in the changing light, purple at dawn and gold at sunset. The people were straightforward in a way that Philadelphia society had never been, saying what they meant without layers of subtle implication. And then there was Ethan. He worked long days at the ranch but came back most evenings, and gradually they fell into a pattern of conversation. She learned that he had come west from Ohio 5 years earlier, that he had learned ranching from the ground up, that he was saving money to buy his own land someday. He learned that she had been sent away from Philadelphia, though she did not elaborate on why, and that she had once dreamed of studying medicine before such dreams were crushed by reality. Why medicine? He asked one evening as they sat on the porch, the first stars appearing in the darkening sky. "Because I wanted to help people," she said. "Because I wanted to understand how the body works, how to heal it. But women are not meant for such things, or so I have been told repeatedly." "That seems like a waste," Ethan said quietly, "having a gift and not being allowed to use it." She looked at him sharply, expecting mockery, but saw only sincerity. "You do not think it is improper for a woman to want such things?" "I think it is improper for anyone to tell another person what they can or cannot dream about," he replied. "Out here, we judge people by what they can do, not by what society says they should do." Something shifted in her chest, a small crack in the wall she had built around her heart. The first snow came in early November, a light dusting that turned the world white and magical. Felicity woke to find Ethan already up, splitting wood for the stove in the yard behind the boarding house. She watched from the window as he worked, the steady rhythm of the axe, the way his breath clouded in the cold air. Marjorie appeared beside her. "He is a good man," she said softly. "I barely know him," Felicity protested. "You know him better than you think," Marjorie replied with a knowing smile. "I have seen the way you look at each other. I have seen the way you both find excuses to be in the same room." Felicity felt her cheeks flush. "He is just a boarder." "If you say so, dear." Marjorie patted her shoulder and moved away, but her smile lingered. That afternoon, Ethan approached her in the kitchen as she was preparing dinner. "There is a dance in town on Saturday," he said, and she heard a hint of nervousness in his voice. "Would you like to go?" With me, her heart hammered in her chest. A dance. A real invitation, not an arrangement made by matchmaking mothers or ambitious fathers. A choice. "Yes," she heard herself say. "I would like that." His smile transformed his face, making him almost boyish despite the weathered skin and serious eyes. "Good. That is good." Saturday arrived with clear skies and the sharp cold that meant winter was truly coming. Felicity wore one of her Philadelphia dresses, a deep blue silk that she had not touched since arriving, and when she came downstairs, she saw Ethan's eyes widen with appreciation. "You look beautiful," he said simply, and the compliment felt more real than any she had received at Philadelphia society balls. The dance was held in the town hall, a large room warmed by stoves in each corner and lit by dozens of lanterns. A fiddle player, a guitarist, and someone with a harmonica provided the music, lively tunes that filled the space with energy. Cowboys danced with shop girls, ranchers with their wives, and everyone seemed to be smiling. Ethan was a surprisingly good dancer, leading her through reels and waltzes with confidence. His hand at her waist was warm and steady, and when their eyes met, Felicity felt something deep and primal stir within her. "Are you glad you came?" he asked during a slower dance, their bodies closer now. "To the dance or to Montana?" she asked. "Both." She considered the question seriously. "I am glad I came to the dance. Montana is more complicated." "Why?" "Because I was sent here as punishment," she admitted. "Because everyone I knew believed I was being difficult and improper, and this was meant to teach me a lesson. How can I be glad about that?" Ethan's hand tightened slightly on her waist. "Sometimes the best blessings look like curses at first," he said. "I learned that when I left Ohio. I was running from something, angry at the world, certain that heading west was just admitting defeat. But it turned out to be the best decision I ever made. This place made me who I am." "And who is that?" she asked softly. "Someone who knows what matters," he replied. "Someone who does not waste time on things that do not. Someone who recognizes something real when he finds it." The music swirled around them, but Felicity barely heard it. "Real, you," he said, his voice low and intense. "This between us. I have felt it since the day I arrived at the boarding house. Tell me I am not imagining it." "You are not imagining it," she whispered, and then his lips were on hers, gentle and questioning, and she kissed him back with all the loneliness and longing she had been carrying since Philadelphia. When they finally broke apart, both breathless, he rested his forehead against hers. "I know this is fast. I know you do not know me well yet, but Felicity, I would like the chance to court you properly, to see where this goes." "I would like that too," she said, and meant it with her whole heart. The courtship that followed was unlike anything Felicity had experienced in Philadelphia. There were no formal calling cards, no chaperoned visits in stuffy parlors. Instead, Ethan took her riding into the mountains on his days off, showing her hidden valleys where deer grazed and eagles soared overhead. They walked along the Beaverhead River, talking about everything and nothing. He taught her to ride better, how to read the weather in the clouds, how to appreciate the vast silence of the wilderness. And slowly, she taught him about her world too. She read him passages from her favorite books, explained the medical texts she had studied in secret, shared her dreams of a future where women could be more than decorative objects in a man's world. "You should study medicine," he said one day as they sat beside the river, watching the water flow past. "If that is what you want, you should find a way." "How?" she asked. "Even if I could find a school that would accept a woman, I have no money of my own. My father controls everything, and he would never approve." "Then we will figure out another way." Ethan said with the same steady confidence he brought to everything. Maybe you start by helping Doc Harrison in town. He is getting old, could probably use an assistant. You learn from him, prove yourself, and eventually, people will see you as a healer regardless of whether you have a fancy degree. It was so simple, so practical, and yet it had never occurred to her. In Philadelphia, everything was about credentials and social standing. But here, maybe Ethan was right. Maybe she could build something different. Winter came in earnest, bringing snow that piled high and temperatures that turned the world into a frozen landscape. The work at the boarding house increased as they fought to keep the building warm and the boarders fed. But Felicity found she did not mind the hard work anymore. Her body had grown stronger, her hands capable. She took pride in the meals she cooked, the clean rooms she maintained, and every evening when Ethan returned from the ranch, her heart lifted. One night in late December, a terrible storm rolled in, bringing winds that howled like wild animals and snow that fell so thick you could not see 3 feet ahead. The boarders all came in early, and Marjorie fretted about anyone caught out in the weather. Around midnight, there was a pounding on the door. Ethan was closest and opened it to find a man on horseback, barely visible through the blowing snow. "There has been an accident at the Bar 7, the man shouted over the wind. "Barn collapsed, several men hurt, we need help." Ethan did not hesitate. "I am coming." He turned to Felicity. "Stay here, stay warm." But she was already moving, grabbing her coat. "I am coming with you. If men are hurt, you will need someone who knows medicine." "Felicity, it is dangerous. I am coming," she repeated firmly, and something in her voice made him nod. They rode through the storm, Felicity clinging to Ethan on his horse, the wind cutting through their clothes like knives. The ranch was chaos when they arrived, men shouting and trying to clear debris from the collapsed barn. 3 men were laid out in the bunkhouse, 2 with broken bones and 1 with a gash across his chest that was bleeding heavily. Felicity pushed aside her fear and fell back on everything she had read, everything she had studied in secret. She directed the men to bring her hot water, clean cloth, whiskey for disinfecting. She set the broken bones with steady hands, stitched the gash closed with careful precision, and stayed with the injured men through the night, monitoring their breathing and checking for signs of shock. Ethan worked beside her, following her instructions without question, his presence a solid anchor in the chaos. By dawn, the storm had passed and all 3 men were stable. The ranch foreman, a grizzled man named Tom, looked at Felicity with new respect. "You saved their lives," he said simply. Doc Harrison could not have done better himself. She was too exhausted to feel pride, but later, riding back to town with Ethan, she felt something settle in her chest. Purpose. Fulfillment. The knowledge that she had done something important. "You were amazing," Ethan said, his arm tight around her waist as the horse picked its way through the snow-covered trail. "I have never seen anything like it. You did not hesitate, did not panic. You just knew what to do." "I was terrified," she admitted, "but you did it anyway." "That is courage, Felicity." When they reached the boarding house, Marjorie had hot coffee and breakfast waiting. After they ate, Ethan walked Felicity to her room, and at the door he took her hands in his. "I love you," he said, the words simple and true. "I know it has only been a few months, but I love you. You are the strongest, smartest, most capable woman I have ever met, and I cannot imagine my life without you in it." Tears filled her eyes, but they were good tears, happy tears. "I love you too," she whispered. "When I came here, I thought my life was ending, but you have shown me it was just beginning." He kissed her then, deep and passionate, and she melted into him, feeling safe and cherished and seen in a way she had never experienced before. News of what Felicity had done at the Bar 7 spread through Dillon like wildfire. Within days, Doc Harrison came to the boarding house asking to speak with her. He was an elderly man with kind eyes and gnarled hands. "I hear you have some medical knowledge," he said without preamble. "Tom says you handled that accident better than most trained doctors. I could use an apprentice, someone to help with patients and learn the trade. It does not pay much, but it would be honest work, and I could teach you everything I know." Felicity could hardly believe what she was hearing. "You would take me on, even though I am a woman?" "I do not care if you are a woman, a man, or a trained monkey," Doc Harrison said with a dry smile. "I care if you can help people. Can you?" "Yes," she said firmly. "I can." So began a new chapter. Felicity spent her mornings working at the boarding house and her afternoons with Doc Harrison, learning to treat everything from broken bones to childhood fevers to difficult births. The old doctor was a patient teacher, and she soaked up knowledge like a sponge. Ethan supported her fully, proud of her accomplishments and never threatened by her ambitions. He began talking more seriously about saving enough money to buy land, about building a ranch of his own, and always, his plans included her. In March of 1884, as winter finally loosened its grip and the first hints of spring appeared, Ethan asked her to marry him properly, with a ring he had saved for months to buy. It was a simple band with a small diamond, but to Felicity, it was more precious than all the jewels in Philadelphia. They married in April in a small ceremony at the church in Dillon, with Marjorie and Doc Harrison and half the town in attendance. Felicity wore a white dress that Marjorie had helped her sew, and Ethan wore his best clothes and looked at her like she was the sun and moon combined. "I do," she said, and meant it with every fiber of her being. "I do," he echoed, and then they were kissing, and the church erupted in applause and cheers. They moved into a small house that Ethan had been renting, a cozy place with 2 rooms and a potbelly stove. It was nothing like the mansion Felicity had grown up in, but it was theirs, and that made it perfect. Their first year of marriage was not easy. Money was tight, work was hard, and the Montana winter tested them both. But they faced everything together, supporting each other through difficulties and celebrating small victories. Felicity continued working with Doc Harrison, and her reputation as a healer grew. Women especially sought her out, appreciating having another woman to confide in about private matters. She delivered babies, treated injuries, and even performed a few minor surgeries under Doc Harrison's guidance. Ethan worked hard at the Bar 7, saving every penny he could toward his dream of owning land. On his days off, he began scouting for property, looking for the perfect place to build their future. One evening in late fall, he came home excited, his eyes bright. "I found it," he announced. 300 acres about 5 miles from town, with good grazing land, a creek running through it, and a stand of timber for building. "The owner is willing to sell at a price I can almost afford." "Almost?" Felicity asked. "We would need to borrow some money from the bank, but Tom says he will vouch for me, and with your income from working with Doc Harrison, we could make the payments." They sat up late that night, going over numbers and making plans. It was risky, taking on debt, but it was also an opportunity. A chance to build something lasting. In December of 1884, they signed the papers and became landowners. The property had an old cabin on it that was barely habitable, but Ethan had plans to build a proper house come spring. For now, they weathered the winter in their rented place and spent every spare moment planning their ranch. Felicity discovered she was pregnant in January of 1885. The realization filled her with joy and terror in equal measure. A baby. A child who would be part her and part Ethan, who would grow up in this wild, beautiful place. When she told Ethan, he picked her up and spun her around, laughing with pure happiness. "We are going to be parents," he said in wonder. "Our child will be born into freedom, will grow up knowing that hard work and dreams can build a life." "You are not worried," she asked. "About what?" "That I will not be a good mother, that I am too independent, too focused on my work." He cupped her face in his hands. "You will be an amazing mother because you are strong and intelligent and kind. Our child will be lucky to have you." The months passed in a blur of activity. Ethan and several men from the Bar 7 worked on building the house on their land, a sturdy structure with 3 bedrooms and a big kitchen. Felicity continued working with Doc Harrison, knowing her time would be limited once the baby came, but wanting to help as long as she could. Their son was born in September of 1885, on a cool morning when the aspens were turning gold. The labor was long and difficult, but Doc Harrison was there, and Ethan held her hand through every contraction, never leaving her side. When the baby finally emerged, crying lustily, Felicity felt a love so overwhelming it took her breath away. Ethan cut the cord with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. "He is perfect," he whispered. "Look at him, Felicity. He is perfect." They named him Samuel, after Ethan's father, and moved into the new house a month later. Life on the ranch was demanding, with livestock to tend and land to manage, but they built a routine. Felicity cared for Samuel and helped with the ranch work, and occasionally assisted Doc Harrison when he needed her for difficult cases. Ethan proved to be a natural rancher, with an instinct for animals and land management. Their herd grew, and within 2 years they had paid off their debt to the bank and were starting to turn a real profit. Other ranchers began seeking Ethan's advice, respecting his knowledge and work ethic. Felicity became known as the woman to call when someone was sick or injured, her skills now rivaling Doc Harrison's. The old doctor began talking about retiring, about leaving his practice in her capable hands. In 1887, their daughter was born, a tiny thing with Ethan's dark hair and Felicity's green eyes. They named her Margaret after Marjorie, who had passed away peacefully in her sleep the previous winter. The old woman had lived long enough to see Felicity thriving, to know that her niece had found love and purpose in Montana. Marjorie was right, Felicity said one evening as she nursed baby Margaret while Samuel played at her feet and Ethan worked on ranch accounts at the table. "She told me that what looked like punishment might be something else. I did not believe her then." Ethan looked up, his eyes soft with love. "And now I know she was right. Being sent here was the best thing that ever happened to me. It led me to you, to this life, to everything that matters." He crossed the room and kissed her gently. "Sometimes the best blessings look like curses at first. I told you that the night of the dance, remember?" "I remember," she said. "And you were right." The years rolled on, bringing both challenges and joys. There were hard winters and dry summers, sick cattle and difficult births, moments of fear and frustration. But there were far more moments of happiness. Samuel and Margaret growing strong and healthy, learning to ride and work and raid. The ranch prospering, becoming known throughout the territory for quality beef and horses. Felicity officially taking over Doc Harrison's practice when he retired, becoming the first female doctor in that part of Montana territory, degree or not. In 1889, Montana became a state, and Dillon celebrated with fireworks and dancing. Ethan and Felicity stood on the porch of their ranch house, watching the distant lights in the sky, their children asleep inside. "You ever miss Philadelphia?" Ethan asked, his arm around her waist. Felicity considered the question seriously. Did she miss the balls and parties, the silk dresses and social intrigue? Did she miss the life that had been planned for her, marriage to a suitable man and a future as a decorative wife? No, she said finally. I do not miss it at all. That life was not real. This is real. You, our children, this land, the work we do. This is what I was meant for. I just did not know it until I was forced to come here. I am glad you were, Ethan said, pulling her closer. Every day I thank whatever fate brought you to Montana, to me. It was not fate, she replied with a smile. It was my father thinking he was punishing me for being difficult. Ethan laughed, the sound warm and full. Then I should thank your father for being such a stubborn fool. I already wrote him a letter saying exactly that, Felicity admitted. Last year, when Margaret was born, I told him that sending me west was the greatest gift he ever gave me, even if he did not mean it that way. Did he respond? He did, actually. He said he was glad things worked out, though he still does not approve of me practicing medicine. But he included a bank draft, a gift for the children. So perhaps he is softening in his old age. They stood together in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge as the fireworks faded. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, more work, the endless cycle of ranch life. But tonight, they could simply be together. Two people who had found each other against all odds and built a life worth living. More years passed. Samuel grew into a strong young man who loved ranching as much as his father did. Margaret showed an early interest in medicine, often following Felicity on her rounds and asking endless questions. In 1892, another son was born, named Ethan Jr., and in 1895, a second daughter they called Rose. The ranch continued to prosper. Ethan's reputation as a fair and knowledgeable rancher spread, and he began acquiring more land, building the operation into one of the most successful in the territory. He never lost sight of what mattered, though, always making time for his family, always supporting Felicity's work. Felicity trained several young women as nurses, creating a network of healthcare providers throughout the region. She wrote articles about frontier medicine that were published in Eastern journals, challenging assumptions about women's capabilities. She never got a formal medical degree, but her expertise was recognized and respected throughout Montana. On their 10th wedding anniversary in 1894, Ethan took her back to Dillon, to the same church where they had married. They renewed their vows with their 4 children in attendance, surrounded by friends and neighbors who had become family. 10 years ago, I married the most remarkable woman I had ever met, Ethan said during the small celebration afterward. She had been sent west as punishment, angry and resentful, certain her life was over. But she had the courage to build something new, to see possibilities instead of limitations. She taught me that sometimes the best blessings look like curses at first, and that love and hard work can transform everything. Felicity, you are my blessing, every single day. Felicity stood and raised her glass. 10 years ago, I married a cowboy who showed me that Montana was not a prison but a promise, who believed in me when I did not believe in myself, who built this life with me, piece by piece, day by day. Ethan, you are my home, my partner, my love. Thank you for showing me what real happiness looks like. The applause and cheers filled the room, and their children clapped and whistled, Samuel making exaggerated gagging sounds at his parents' affection, until Margaret elbowed him to behave. That night, back at the ranch, Felicity stood in the bedroom of the house they had built together and looked at herself in the mirror. She was 33 now, no longer the polished Philadelphia socialite who had arrived in Dillon a decade earlier. Her hands were rough from work, her face had lines from sun and laughter, her body had borne 4 children and showed it, but she was happy. Deeply, genuinely happy in a way she had never been in Philadelphia. Ethan came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and meeting her eyes in the mirror. "What are you thinking about?" "About that girl who got off the train 10 years ago," she said. "So angry, so certain her life was ending. I wish I could tell her what was really beginning." "Would she have believed you?" Felicity smiled. "Probably not. Some things you have to discover for yourself." He turned her in his arms and kissed her, and she kissed him back with all the passion and love that had only grown deeper over the years. They had built something rare and precious, a partnership based on mutual respect and support, a love that had weathered every storm. The years continued to roll forward. The children grew and thrived. Samuel eventually took over most of the ranch operations, proving himself as capable as his father. Margaret went east to medical school in 1905, one of the first women accepted to a prestigious program, armed with letters of recommendation from doctors throughout Montana who had witnessed Felicity's work. Ethan Jr. showed a talent for horses, starting a breeding program that became famous throughout the region. Rose inherited her father's love of literature and her mother's compassion, becoming a teacher in Dillon. Ethan and Felicity grew older together, silver threading through their hair, but their love never dimmed. They still took rides up into the mountains on sunny days. They still sat on their porch in the evenings, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant colors. They still reached for each other in the night, comfort and passion intertwined after decades of marriage. In 1910, on a warm June evening, they celebrated their 26th wedding anniversary. All 4 children had returned home for the occasion, along with Samuel's wife and their 2 small children, making Ethan and Felicity grandparents. The house was full of noise and laughter. 3 generations gathered around the big dining table Ethan had built years ago. After dinner, as the younger ones played outside and the dishes were cleared, Margaret pulled Felicity aside. She was 33 now, a doctor in her own right, working at a hospital in Denver. "Mother, I have been offered a position as head of women's medicine at the hospital," she said, her eyes shining. "They want me to build a program training female doctors. It is everything I have dreamed of." Felicity hugged her daughter tightly. "That is wonderful. I am so proud of you." "I would not be here without you," Margaret said. "You showed me that women could be healers, that we did not have to accept the limitations society placed on us. You paved the way for everything I am doing." "You paved your own way," Felicity corrected gently. "I just showed you it was possible. You did the hard work of actually accomplishing it." Later, Ethan found her standing on the porch, looking out at the land they had built into a thriving ranch. "What are you thinking about?" he asked, the same question he had asked countless times over the years. "About blessings and curses," she said. "About how being sent west was supposed to be my punishment, the end of everything I wanted, but it turned out to be the beginning of everything I needed." Ethan pulled her close, and she rested her head on his shoulder, breathing in the familiar scent of him mixed with pine and wood smoke. "You told me once that sometimes the best blessings look like curses at first," she continued. "You were right. Every good thing in my life came from that curse." "Not the curse," Ethan corrected. "From you having the courage to see possibilities instead of limitations, from you being willing to build something new instead of mourning what was lost. We built it together," she said firmly. "I could not have done any of this without you." "We are a good team," he agreed, kissing the top of her head. They stood together as the sun sank below the mountains, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink and purple. Inside the house, their children laughed, their grandchildren played, the legacy of their love made manifest in the next generations. The years passed, as years do. Ethan and Felicity grew old together, their bodies slowing but their spirits still strong. They saw all 4 children married and settled, welcomed more grandchildren, watched the ranch continue to prosper under Samuel's management. In 1920, Montana granted women the right to vote, and Felicity cast her ballot with tears of joy, thinking of all the women who had fought for this moment. Ethan stood beside her, proud and supportive as always. They celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary in 1934, surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren. The house was bursting with family, and the yard was filled with neighbors and friends who had come to celebrate the couple who had become legends in Dillon. 50 years, Ethan said in his speech, his voice still strong despite his 77 years. 50 years of marriage to the most remarkable woman who ever lived. She came west as a punishment and became the greatest blessing of my life. She has healed countless people, raised 4 incredible children, built this ranch alongside me, and loved me every single day. Felicity, you are my heart. Felicity, 73 and still beautiful in her own way, stood with help from Margaret. 50 years ago, I married a cowboy who saw me when others only saw a difficult woman, who believed in my dreams and helped me achieve them, who built this life with me through hard work and love. Ethan, you showed me that sometimes the best blessings look like curses at first. You showed me that real love is partnership and respect and choosing each other every day. Thank you for 50 years of choosing me. The celebration lasted well into the night, with music and dancing and stories shared by multiple generations. As the party finally wound down, Ethan and Felicity sat together on the porch swing he had built decades ago, watching the stars emerge. "Are you happy?" Ethan asked, his hand finding hers with the ease of 50 years of practice. "More than I ever thought possible," Felicity replied. "When I was that angry girl on the train, I could not have imagined this life. But every day, I thank God for sending me west, for bringing me to you, for giving us this beautiful life together." "No regrets," he pressed gently. She thought about it seriously, reviewing their decades together. There had been hard times, certainly. Winters that tested them, financial struggles, the death of Marjorie and Doc Harrison and other friends. But regrets, none, she said firmly. Not a single one. Everything we went through made us who we are. I would not change a moment of it. Ethan squeezed her hand. Neither would I. "You are my forever blessing, Felicity." "And you are mine," she whispered. They sat together in the darkness, 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had built a life of meaning and purpose, who had loved each other through 50 years of joy and sorrow. The mountains stood silent around them, witnesses to their enduring love. The seasons turned, as they always did in Montana. Spring brought new life to the ranch. Summer warmed the valley. Autumn painted the aspens gold, and winter blanketed everything in white. The cycle continued, year after year, constant and reliable. Ethan and Felicity continued on as well, their bodies aging but their love as strong as ever. They spent their days surrounded by family, helping where they could with the ranch and the grandchildren, but mostly just enjoying the life they had built together. On a cold December morning in 1936, Ethan passed away peacefully in his sleep, Felicity holding his hand. He was 79 years old and had lived a full life, but his death shattered something in Felicity's heart. They had been together for 52 years, partners in every sense of the word, and the world felt empty without him. The funeral was attended by hundreds of people, testament to the respect and love the community felt for Ethan. Felicity stood dry-eyed through the service, holding tight to Margaret's hand, drawing strength from her children and grandchildren. But that night, alone in the house they had built together, she finally let herself cry. Great, wrenching sobs that came from the depths of her soul. She had lost her partner, her best friend, her love. Margaret stayed with her for several weeks, worried about leaving her mother alone. But Felicity was stronger than she looked. She had survived being sent west as a punishment, had built a life from nothing, had faced every challenge Montana could throw at her. She would survive this too. "He would want you to keep living," Margaret said gently. "To enjoy the family you built together, to see the grandchildren grow up." "I know," Felicity replied, "and I will, but I need time to grieve what I lost." She took that time, working through her grief slowly and carefully. She stayed on the ranch, surrounded by memories of Ethan but also by the living legacy of their love. Samuel and his wife lived in the main house now, but they built her a small cottage nearby where she could have privacy and independence. The years passed more slowly without Ethan, but they still passed. Felicity found purpose in her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, in the occasional medical consultation when someone sought her advice, in the quiet satisfaction of watching the ranch continue to prosper. She lived to see the end of World War II, to see Samuel's grandson, her great-great-grandchild, born in 1945. She was 84 years old, her body frail but her mind still sharp. On a warm summer evening in 1946, she sat on the porch of her cottage, looking out at the mountains that had become so familiar over the decades. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors, and she felt a deep peace settle over her. She thought about the journey that had brought her here. That angry girl on the train in 1883, certain her life was ending. The cowboy who had shown her different. The life they had built together through hard work and love. Margaret found her there an hour later, slumped peacefully in her chair, a slight smile on her face. She had passed quietly, looking at the mountains she had come to love. They buried her next to Ethan, under a large pine tree on a hill overlooking the ranch. The funeral was another huge affair, attended by family and friends from across Montana and beyond. Her 4 children, all elderly themselves now, spoke about their mother's strength and courage, about the legacy she had left. "She came west as a punishment," Margaret said in her eulogy. "Sent by a father who thought he was teaching her a lesson. But she turned that curse into a blessing, building a life of purpose and love. She became a healer, a wife, a mother, a grandmother. She showed all of us that sometimes the best blessings look like curses at first, if we have the courage to see the possibilities instead of the limitations." The ranch continued on, passed down through the generations, a testament to what Ethan and Felicity had built together. Their great-great-grandchildren walked the same land they had walked. Rode horses descended from the ones they had raised, told stories about the remarkable couple who had started it all. And on quiet summer evenings, when the sun set over the mountains and the wind whispered through the pines, it was easy to imagine 2 figures standing on the porch of the old ranch house. A cowboy and his wife, hands intertwined, looking out at the land they had claimed and loved. 2 people who had found each other against all odds, who had turned a curse into a blessing, who had loved each other through 52 years of marriage and beyond. Their legacy lived on in the ranch, in the family they had created, in the lives Felicity had saved, and the example they had both set. A testament to the truth that sometimes the best blessings really do look like curses at first, and that love and courage can transform everything. The mountains stood silent and eternal, as they had for countless generations before, and would for countless generations to come. But the story of Ethan and Felicity, the cowboy and the woman who came west as punishment, would be told and retold, a reminder that sometimes being forced down an unwanted path leads you exactly where you were always meant to be.